Hi everyone, welcome back to the Journey of Now with myself, Karis, and my partner, Nick. And we are busy doing a conversation while we're driving. We thought we'd take advantage of the quiet before we go and pick up the kids. And we just had a few things on our mind and thought we'd invite you into the conversation as well. One of the things that we were chatting about was just, we were reflecting on just the conversations we've had to have with our own parents, the boundaries we've had to set in place, but also what is the type of relationship we'd like to have with our own children when they get to our age, so it's been interesting to observe what's been coming up with that and whatever stories, or even the labels that people have labeled you and those types of things, because people will always ask specifically. I've heard from our parents when we've had those really uncomfortable, difficult conversations where you're just busy putting a boundary up, and then it's like, how would you feel if your children did these things? And immediately for me, I felt this pride. So actually, I'd be really proud if my child was like me. And if they were able to advocate for their own needs 10 times better than what I am, if they were more assertive, if there were all these things. But I'd be really happy about that. But I want them to be their own person, I'll never make them feel guilty, because my feelings with what they're talking about or the boundary that they're busy putting up, that's my own stuff that I need to deal with, So
and you're not trying to cultivate this codependent relationship. At the end of the day, your primary responsibility is to help facilitate the development of an individual, that they can go and live out their lives as the best version of themselves, and they're capable to do that within reality, within the big open world. And you saying that, it would be an incredible moment to be a part of that. I'm not saying it would be easy if my kids were asserting boundaries, sure, but I do believe that if you've done a good job, they are going to have an opinion, and they're going to say, hey mom, hey dad, this is the way that I choose to live my life, and I'm really happy, and I wouldn't necessarily be able to do this if you had not facilitated X, Y, and Z, but I'm good now.
And you might not agree with it, but at the end of the day, it's their lie.
Yep.
And this is the thing my son and I were busy talking about, because I've been reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and she speaks about this whole notion of knowing, this innate knowing that we have within ourselves. And it's how we look to external sources to validate our own internal knowledge. Okay, that is what we do to just sort of affirm that what we're feeling is real. But what I've seen in terms of the clients we've worked with, or the just typical conversations we've had, is how people sort of absolves themselves of the responsibility of making decisions for themselves, and then they go to this external source, be it God, religion, plant medicine, or tarot cards, or even meditating and striving, just looking for something out there, when it's really not about flailing and trying to reach for something that's out there, because all of the answers are sitting in that stillness, in that place, in that quiet place within yourself. And that's what that knowing is about. Nobody else can tell you.
And I think, just to bring it back to the parenting side, that one of the key roles is being able to teach your children how to know their knowing, how to register that intuitive sixth sense, that sense of self, that sense of purpose, that inner compass, or GPS, like Michael Neal likes to use. That is essentially what you're doing. And if you can instill that awareness within your child, which is already built in, you might just facilitate the conversations and bring it, take this very busy world that we have to take in through all of our five senses, and just filter it down to be hey, put that aside for a moment and really look at this. What is that? What is your heart saying?
But what would happen if you actually had a new era of grown-ups who were taught to trust themselves, and who actually were grown-ups and acted like it and didn't ask permission for anything, instead of looking to the world for what to do next, we would be having a very different conversation. And that's not what society wants. They want you to be
codependent,
dependent, reliant.
Yes. Dependent on substances, dependent on medication, dependent on other
Advice.
people, dependent on outside advice, dependent on entertainment, dependent on all these different things. And not to say that any of these things are bad.
No.
It's the intention, and I think the reason behind the use. If you are looking for yourself within said medicine or practice, you are not going to find yourself, because you are not a medicine, you're not a practice. It's like you doing ayahuasca and saying, look, this spirit or experience will enlighten me and I will find myself. No, you were never lost.
Yeah.
But you have chosen to believe that your experience can only become something else if you were to navigate and move through that specific vehicle, being ayahuasca. Is that wrong?
I would say, though, I think the problem is that you listen to other people's experiences and then you think that you can apply that same medicine to yourself. Because I don't just disagree that these medicines are there to facilitate you also finding that knowing to some degree. But all that it does is really, it's going quiet within yourself.
And it takes away the veil.
It takes away that noise of your mind.
Yeah.
And you're able to really sit and see that knowing within yourself.
And you sit for a long period of time.
And you commune with that. And that's where those like massive shifts happen. But not everybody is able to have those types of experiences depending on where you are in your journey with yourself. And so you can't just take someone else's experience with mushrooms, ayahuasca, whatever it is, and think that, oh my gosh, because this person had such an enlightening experience, I'm also going to have the same thing. And this is the thing with whatever you choose as the mediator between yourself and your decision. And this is why, learning to trust and develop that relationship with that knowing, with that inner being, with that inner voice within ourselves is probably one of the most important lessons we can teach our children. It's not just, developing that relationship with that inner knowing goes beyond just learning to trust yourself. I feel like learning to trust yourself is the foundation for that, because when you trust yourself, it's like you make space and there's not as much noise, and then you hear the knowing.
And then we come back to the parenting side, because how many of us as adults are still seeking permission from our parents to go forth and do the things that your heart is calling you to do, to quit your job, to start that business, to travel, to reach out to that one person, to say no to family holiday, to set a boundary, to dyeing your hair, whatever the case may be. How many people are seeking that permission slip from their caregivers once upon a time?
And it's so funny, because if Nick and I had chosen to listen to any of what our parents' idea of what a safe life or a good life was, Nick would still be working in construction, I would be working in insurance or accounting or whatever else, and working that 9 to 5 because it's safe, and we would never have done what we have chosen to do. And so this is the thing, it's like that knowing. And I love how she puts it, where she says it goes beyond language. And so she's stopped trying to explain to the world what it is that she's trying to do, and she just takes action.
What is it that you're trying to know?
Exactly. So I've been explaining to the kids, specifically Noah, it's like, right now, yes, you're going to have to ask permission because you're still growing, but there are things that you're going to want to do, and it comes from like this pressing, this swelling within ourselves. And it was so interesting to hear the concept of our soul doesn't speak in the language of indoctrination, it speaks in the language of imagination. And so bringing it back to that concept, it's like teaching your children or just showing them the power of dreaming, imagination, and bringing that sense of vitality back in your life, because it comes from being able to firstly like be inspired and feel some sense of zest being injected back into you from sitting and dreaming, and actually just giving yourself permission to do things that are outside of your comfort zone, the safety zone, and like what society deems as right or wrong, or what you should or shouldn't be doing. You just give yourself permission to dream and go to the next right thing and feel into things, and it doesn't need to make sense to anyone else except being able to quench that thirst within your soul, you know. So teaching your kids those skills in terms of how to identify what is a fantasy and what is the like.
And just to, and maybe this is going to ruffle a couple of feathers, but we touched on this on what, maybe this will be a separate podcast or discussion, but essentially so many parents nowadays are wanting their kids to firstly grow up and mature way faster than what should be a natural progression, and like step completely out of the space of imagination into indoctrination, essentially.
Yeah, because
and then just to add to that, it's also this thing of, it's far easier for me to leave my kids in school, to not have to take up the mantle myself and be like, as much as I'm teaching, having you learn, about ones and zeros, my role is to help you understand your emotions, help you understand and perceive the world in the most open, empowering manner, and perceive yourself in that way so that you can make empowered decisions moving forward in your life. And most parents are just like, no, I'm going to leave my kids in school. I trust that entire system. This is going to turn out really well.
Yeah, because that's the norm, which is where you basically relieve yourself the responsibility of actually being a parent, and you give that over to someone else.
Oh,
or
my
some
kids
other
at a
system.
private school. Yeah, my kids at a private school, they're getting everything they
My
need.
kids are at a boarding school,
Yes.
or do you know what? I've just put them in front of the TV for 4 or 5 hours. There's no judgment. We do the same thing, but do you know, it's not like there's a difference between. To a degree, I'm just saying there are times where they do watch a lot of TV, but at the end of the day, it's not a thing where I put them there so that they can be numbed out and I let that box parent my children, So this is the thing, you also have to take absolute responsibility when you choose to bring children into the world, because ultimately they didn't choose to be here. And you have had there's so many opportunities along the way to decide whether or not you actually want to go through with bringing this child into this world. And I know this sounds radical, but at the end of the day, it is a radical responsibility upon ourselves when we choose to become the custodians of these people, of these beings. And
I don't want to say it requires sacrifice, but
it is a sacrifice. It is the ultimate sacrifice to a degree.
I'd say you put certain things aside because you can see the importance of, looking after myself and actually getting my own internal shit together takes first priority, because if I don't get that inner voice or that inner critic or whatever you want to call it, or if I have not done enough work upon myself to notice my innate well-being and understand myself, I'm going to pass on patterns, indoctrination, ideals, frameworks and things that aren't even my own.
Yeah.
That are passed on from generation to generation. Then you've got these familial patterns.
Yeah.
Or generational patterns that just get reinstalled over and over again. And then you've got these programs of lack and these programs of fear and these programs of I don't love myself, I'm not worthy, or life is hard, or this or that. And if you are not willing to put the work into yourself and to really, look at yourself under a microscope and refine who you are. And this doesn't need to be this ugly process. This can be a really empowering process of just deepening this relationship with yourself. If you're not willing to do that whilst you have, let's say, kids in the picture, or you're planning on having kids, my goodness,
It's so much easier to do these things before you have kids because, unfortunately, I mean, Nick and I started our interest in this work when we chose to have children, and our eldest has some scars because when he was growing up, we were also growing up. And thank God we chose to do the work on ourselves when he was younger, and we're still continuing to do it.
And we still don't get it right.
No, but at the end of the day, you make the intention from a deep space to do better, so that they don't have to live in the aftermath of the mess that you have within yourself that you still haven't cleaned up,
and you still haven't wanted to take accountability and responsibility for. Because maybe when we started our journey, it was a thing of you want to point fingers at your parents for everything. And here's the thing: I might have a pattern of behavior, and yes, maybe it stemmed from neglect or whatever the case was, whatever the case may be. Sure, but that has happened. Is it now my parents' responsibility to heal that within myself? No, they can't do that. It's done. Now, I take up the mantle and I say, okay, cool. I am not necessarily happy about that, but this is the hand that I'm dealt, and I'm going to do my absolute best with the awareness that I have to shift this narrative.
What's that whole thing of, for you it might have been the worst day of your whole life, but for them it was just a normal Tuesday. So it's also just looking at the context of things and just realizing, the things don't hold the same weight for other people because it wasn't their experience, it was yours. So ultimately the responsibility of
choosing... It's always going to be yours.
Yeah, it's always going to be yours.
So that little victim narrative that sometimes wants to come up to validate pain and disarray and how difficult your life was and how it's still making your life rather difficult, that's where you sit down and be like, ooh, I need to actually take some stock here and look at what I can control now, because you can control all of that. It's actually all within your control. And you might believe, oh no, this person has power over me. Well, you can reclaim that power through making empowered decisions for yourself. It's really not a complex equation, but we make it very complex and very, very difficult for ourselves because we have all these associations and everything is built on maybe this hierarchy. And if you've never been able to place yourself on top of your pyramid of priorities, it's going to be very difficult to assert a boundary, to make a decision for yourself, to implement a framework, let alone take an action.
I would even go so far as to say, there's this whole concept about healing is not trying to get rid of the pain. It's actually building your ability to hold it and to sit with it. And I think that a lot of the time when we choose to not put the boundary up, choose to not have the difficult conversation, choose to not make our own decision and stay true to ourselves, it's because we're trying on some level to keep the peace, to save face, to do the things, but you're the one that's losing at the end of the day because you are not able to sit with the discomfort of what it means to grow. And so this is why it is so important to just model it first. I think this is where, and I've said this to my mother many times, I can deal with my own guilt of how whatever you're projecting onto me, I can deal with the guilt, I can deal with the discomfort, I can deal with however I'm feeling. But what I will not deal with is the level of self-betrayal I feel from not staying true to the rules that we've set for ourselves and for our family unit. So this is the thing, you have to be able to sit and learn to sit within the discomfort of making a decision that other people are uncomfortable with. Because it's not about saving face, it's about living your own life and being true to the things that...
And by doing that, you're not only reparenting yourself, but you're reparenting your parents indirectly.
Yeah, and then modeling...
Because you become a very uncomfortable reflection...
of what they didn't do.
Of what they didn't do, and maybe the things that they did not want to look at, they're having to look at now. And it's not done out of spite. It's just you. I mean, one of the key principles that you and I have both agreed upon in terms of how we live is prioritizing our peace.
Yeah.
And if something is affecting my peace,
with my peace.
We take it out of the equation. It's a very, very
so quick.
simple.
I will not go back for a second round.
approach.
You are out immediately the first time it happens. So
Just a quick takeaway. Take a moment and have a look at, maybe what came up and stirred in this conversation today. What hit home? What ruffled some feathers? What didn't you agree with? What made you feel uncomfortable? Or what inspired you? What felt expansive? And really question the why. Get curious behind it. And not to say that our approach is for everyone.
no.
But the invitation is consider looking at your situation differently. And even if you're to take one step in the direction of your knowing, of what feels right to you, you're moving the needle not just for yourself but for your kids. And if you don't have kids, and you may have kids, it could be for your sibling.
But you have no idea the ripple of your decision and who's watching you. So just keep that in account. So have a wonderful day or evening, and thank you for joining us on your journey of now.